Sam Seder on the Majority Report. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program Meron Rapoport, editor at Local Call and a writer at 972 Magazine. Meron, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
The last time we spoke, I think, was probably at sometime around this last year. When you were reporting on the massive protests about the attempt by the Netanyahu government to so-called reform, essentially, the laws regarding your Supreme Court in Israel. Things have obviously are very different now, and I'd like to talk about that. But first, obviously, I want to talk about this amazing reporting that you participated in as both editor at Local Call and a writer at 972 Magazine. Also, The Guardian was reporting on this. And I want to just start before we go into the details of this story. It was just revealed yesterday by his name, I think, is Gur Megiddo, who is a writer at Haaretz, that Haaretz had at least parts of this story that they were reporting back in 2022, and he was brought in by Israeli authorities as they're investigating this attempt by Israel to blackmail the then ICC prosecutor, in addition to all the surveillance, and we'll talk about that. But he was brought in and essentially told, if you publish the story, I'm just going to read from this. When he wanted to publish the story, he got a phone call from the senior security official from Israel. Can you come in and see me tomorrow? The conversation began with words, he writes later. We understand you know about the prosecutor, referring to the ICC prosecutor. And Megiddo writes, it was a polite conversation, a polite threat. It was explained that if I published the story, I would suffer the consequences and get to know the interrogation rooms of the Israeli security authorities from the inside. In the end, it was made clear to me that even sharing the information, quote, with my friends abroad, referring to foreign media outlets, would lead to the same results. And so I just want to start by saying, not only congratulations, but to make it clear how much is at stake in your reporting of this. What do you make? Were you aware that the Haaretz writer had gone through this process?
No, we didn't. We didn't know that. We knew that Gur Megiddo did publish a report about Yossi Cohen, the former head of the Mossad. He was head of the Mossad at that time. That he had strange visits in Congo, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and something had to do with the former president of Congo, Joseph Kabila, and that he was later deported almost from Congo. We knew that, and we had a hint that it was related to the prosecutor issue, but we didn't know more than that. We certainly didn't know that he was threatened in this way by the Israeli authorities.
Have you received, prior to publishing this or in the course of the reporting, have you received threats from the Israeli authorities? Because I have to say, and we'll talk about this in a moment, the nature of the threats to the ICC prosecutor, the former ICC chief prosecutor, these were not sort of official threats, as it were. These were threats of blackmail and extortion and sort of extra, outside the law, essentially. I don't know how else to articulate that.
Yes, that's the way it seems. I have to make it clear. We did an investigation for several months together. I'm talking Local Call in 972 with the Guardian, a shared joint investigation with the Guardian regarding what we call the almost 10 years war, secret war of Israel against the ICC, against the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Surveillance by the Israeli army and other intelligence agencies. While we were investigating this, the Guardian has come out with this own report about the whole Yossi Cohen's affair and really this incredible story about how he threatened personally and what seems, according to this report, as a director blackmail, trying to blackmail Bensouda, the former prosecutor in The Hague, Fatou Bensouda. Yes, but so in this, I don't know much more than was written by the report in The Guardian. Of course, I know the reporter. I personally, I trust him totally. He's super reliable, but I don't know too much. But yes, what is described there, I think it is hard to describe it else otherwise than blackmail and threatening.
Okay, so let's step back for a moment and talk about what you have reported, which essentially starts with for nearly a decade, Israel's been surveilling senior international criminal court officials at The Hague, Palestinian human rights workers as well, and other UN officials, anybody who might be in any way participating in the recording or the noting of human rights violations by Israel military and officials perpetrated upon Palestinians in the West Bank and presumably in Gaza and within Israel proper. What was the nature of, at first, the surveillance, and who authorized this surveillance, and for what purpose?
As far as we know, it came directly from Prime Minister Netanyahu. Netanyahu was very worried, and in our report we say he was obsessed by the procedures in the ICC. From the very beginning, what happened is that Palestine was accepted as member of the ICC in 2015, right after it was accepted as a member of the UN General Assembly. It was accepted as a member of the ICC. It signed the Rome Statute. And then right afterwards, the PA, the Palestinian Authority, filed a complaint to the ICC about alleged war crimes committed by Israel in the West Bank and Gaza. And the prosecutor, the then prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, opened a preliminary investigation at that stage. From that moment on, as we reported, Netanyahu was obsessed with this investigation, and he first of all set some kind of a special team composed of many intelligence agencies, from the Army intelligence, A200, and the Mossad and Shabak, all in concerted effort to let's say, to surveil, if I will put it in the most, in the words authorized by the Israeli censorship, to surveil anything that has to do with the ICC. It means officials of the ICC, like Bensouda and other, and then afterwards the current prosecutor Karim Khan, and the Palestinian who communicated with them, meaning mainly human rights activists and officials of the PA who were responsible for filing all kind of reports about alleged war crimes done committed by Israel in the occupied territories. So that was a long process, very detailed, they were really obsessed, and people in the army, especially in the intelligence of the army, were felt, as they told us, they felt quite uncomfortable that they are being used, that it's an army intelligence meant to combat, threats, military threats on Israel, and not political threats, and not threats of officials being indicted in The Hague, and where they felt unease being used, that the technology and the know-how was being used for completely political targets instead of military ones.
Now, your reporting outlines that the surveillance that these various Israeli the spy agencies did and intelligence agencies did was to intercept the charges or complaints, essentially, of Israeli actions towards Palestinians as a way of then attempting to meet with the ICC prosecutor. And Israel does not acknowledge that the ICC prosecutor has any jurisdiction or, on some level, even officially exists as a prosecutor, I guess, as a way of addressing these complaints without and simultaneously essentially pretending that they don't know that they exist. So offering information as if they're just offering information that is, but really hoping to undercut the validity of these claims by offering, and I presume, we don't know the exact nature of this information that they provided to the ICC, so we can't really judge its validity. Is that right?
Yes, there were two main things. One is really surveilling the communications of Bensouda and then of the current prosecutor, Karim Khan, with Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. Surveilling the communication between them, knowing what is interesting for them. What do they ask their Palestinian counterpart, not counterpart, but what are their intentions? This is one thing. Then, yes, as you said, they monitored and tried to get hold of documents that were passed by the Palestinian, either human rights activists or officials of the Palestinian Authority, with information about alleged crimes. Now, there were, what was said is that the reason they did it is what it exists in the court, in the ICC. There is this rule of what is called complementarity, meaning that if a state does investigate seriously crimes, alleged crimes, then the ICC cannot investigate the same crime, the same allegation. Israel, who usually does not investigate allegation against its military personnel in the West Bank and Gaza, in this way tried to get all of this information and and reopen or open initiate investigation that it did not in the beginning. The fear also was by the ICC officials is that in these documents that were passed to the ICC, there were sometimes names of Palestinians who complained, private person, and there was a concern in the ICC and also by Palestinian human rights activists that once their names will be known to the Israeli authorities, they could be harmed or blackmailed, as we know many times happens when Israel is, for example, saying to a person, if you don't give us information, we will not give you a permit to work in Israel, or will not give a permit for your mother to go to a hospital in Israel, or things like that. So there was this fear. We don't know if such a use, if it was used or abused, this information in order to threaten Palestinian individuals. We don't know, but the fear was in the ICC and in the Palestinian human rights organization that such a use will be done. And what has to be added there, that what we find out, and I think this is also quite troubling, although Israel does not recognize the authority of the ICC, it is not a party to the Rome Statute, and so it is not part of the ICC, as the US, as Russia and China and other democracies like the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and other great democracies like them. Although it's not a part, what we discovered is that there were unofficial channels in which officials from the Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Foreign Affairs went to The Hague and met with officials in the ICC, presumably with Bensouda herself, and in order to, in an unofficial way, to try to persuade her that there are no crimes being committed and that she doesn't have a jurisdiction. Now, what we found out is that these lawyers were in possession of this information that was obtained by this, I cannot call it otherwise, illegal surveillance on the team of the ICC. So there was a very strange situation in which legal experts went to The Hague to discuss issues with the ICC officials, but having an information that they obtained through surveillance. So it's a quite funny situation.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously raises some major questions about the integrity of these legal officials who are using extra, legal or illegal means in which to further their supposed legally principled arguments. We should also say that, as you mentioned earlier, The Guardian reported that the Mossad ran a parallel operation of surveillance that seems to have been far more focused on on Bensouda and her close family as a way of blackmail, extortion, to convince her, not based upon any legal principles, but rather on how messy this will be for you and your family if you go forward with these things. I want to jump forward. When Meron announced his seeking of indictments, I found that, which I, had no reason, I guess, to look for prior to this, that in 2021, when he replaced the former chief prosecutor, Israel was very happy about this, and it comes up in the context of your reporting. They felt that, like, okay, how much do we have a sense as to whether Bensouda, who was the then prosecutor, whether she left? Is any part of her departure a function of, like, this has become too tenuous for me, with the sort of like this hanging over my head?
No, as far as I know, it's a tenure of 9 years. The prosecutors are being elected for 9 years, and she finished her term. So I don't have information that she left because of that. It was known in advance. What was said, half, not officially, of course, is that, first of all, what happened is that in 2019, Bensouda, as I told you, she began her investigation in 2015 in the Palestine case. In 2019, she reached the conclusion that there is a basis for an official investigation. She finished her preliminary investigation and decided that there is enough evidence for a formal investigation. But instead of opening this investigation, she went to the court, to the pre-trial court, in order to for the court to approve that it has jurisdiction over Palestine. This is a legal thing, but in Israel, we had some sources saying that in Israel, it was interpreted as a success for Israel, because this whole process that she went for the pre-trial, asking if it has to decide if it has jurisdiction, this delayed the investigation for almost a year and a half. So in Israel, it was conceived as a success. Whether that has anything to do with the pressures on Bensouda, we have no idea, no confirmation for that. But we know that in Israel it was interpreted, some legal expert interpreted as a success.
And in once that, if you could just clarify for the timeline for me, once it was established that the ICC felt like we do have jurisdiction here, despite the delay, at that point, because the IDF and others had been spying on and intercepting surveillance to the ICC, they knew who were collecting and recording the allegations that could end up being used in prosecutions against Israeli authorities. And they then took that opportunity to say that these organizations, these NGOs, Palestinian ones, were in fact not, they were terrorist organizations, as a way of, I presume, and you tell me, preempting the validity of the evidence they had collected.
Yes, it's part also from, as we try to depict, to portray in our report. It's a long one, but still there are many more details that were left out. Part of the campaign against the ICC was to delegitimize the Palestinian Human Rights Organization. That was even official. The Ministry for Strategic Affairs started this work to delegitimize the human rights organization which are accusing Israel of committing war crimes. So this was something that was going on for since at least 2017 and maybe even before. So in parallel to what was going between Israel and the ICC, between these surveillance efforts, there was a process in order to delegitimize this organization. And in October 2021, if I'm not mistaken, the Minister of Defense, then Minister of Defense, Benny Gantz, declared 6 human rights organizations, including 2 or 3 that were very central to the accusation in The Hague, declared them a terrorist organization. Now, this was not, of course, the main goal was the same, to fail any process in the ICC against Israel and Israeli officials, but it's not sure that it was connected directly. That we have even some sources in the IDF saying that they were not happy with Benny Gantz's decision, that they didn't think that it was worthwhile declaring this organization terrorist organization, that the information that was at the basis of declaring them terrorist organization that was obtained by the Shabak was not strong. And as you know, at that time, it was found that there were Pegasus spyware on some of the phones, of the cellular phones of officials in this organization. So it could be separate operations, but the goal was the same.
So let's turn to, I'm curious, I mean, all of this would suggest that there was real concern by Netanyahu, and I imagine other, Israeli authorities, that over the course of at least a decade, that the ICC would take the action, essentially, that they have taken now, and that they could continue to take in a moment. How has the potential for criminal indictments against Netanyahu and Gallant, I guess it is, how has that been? How has the Israeli public reacted to that?
Well, when Karim Khan declared that he is going to the court asking from the court to issue this arrest warrant for Netanyahu and Gallant, I would say that the huge majority, almost a consensus in the Jewish Israeli society, parties, press, was furious. Saying this is an anti-Semitic move, that it compared, because, as you know, there were arrest warrants against Yahya Sinwar and Mohammed Deif, leaders of Hamas, who were responsible for the atrocious attack of Hamas on October 7th, 2023. So as if they are comparing Netanyahu to Sinwar, and they were furious. So in this respect, this operation that we are discussing in itself, maybe most of the Israeli society maybe accept, because if this court is doing these horrible things like issuing arrest warrant for our prime minister, then maybe this operation was
warranted,
was needed.
Yeah.
But I would say that there are two levels here. One is, of course, the personal level. Netanyahu feared to be indicted, as he was indicted in the end. Uh, uh, Senior military commanders also feared that they will be indicted, and this was one of the reasons for which the army was involved. The army intelligence was involved. But I would add another level. I think that Israel does understand uh, that this is not just a personal issue. It's not just a personal fate of Netanyahu or Gallant or maybe later Gantz, so I don't know who, or Herzl Halevi, the chief of staff, the current chief of staff, we don't know. It's much more than that because it's once high officials, and they couldn't be higher than Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant. Once such higher officials are indicted, it sheds a light of delegitimization on the whole of the state of Israel, of the whole of its activity. So it's not just, the personal issue. Nobody wants to be indicted. Nobody wants, once you are indicted, there are 132 states that are signatories to this treaty, so you cannot go there to France or to Germany or to South America or to most of the African countries. It's not just a personal thing. It's the situation of the state of Israel. And I would add another thing. I think this is, of course, not something we've written in the report, but this is my personal take. Israel knows that it is committing what could amount to crimes in the West Bank and Gaza. It knows that, or at least it suspects that this is the way that the world, the international law will conceive that. Maybe they feel that they do it for just reasons, but they know. And I think the hysteria of bringing all these security intelligence agencies is at the heart stands this being conscious that we are not doing the right thing.
And I imagine there's a similar dynamic around the ICJ's investigation and now, essentially enjoining or attempting to, issue a restraining order against Israel's assault on Rafah, which my understanding is that they've now brought in ground troops. Do you have a sense, and that there is any opportunity for the general sentiment in Israel to are there fissures developing where you might see, instead of just defensiveness, that it begins to sort of change the consciousness or what? I mean, this is analogous to the conversation we were having about half of the country protesting against what Netanyahu wanted to do with this, the judiciary. The question was, was there going to be an expansion of the consciousness that this authoritarianism is actually imported from just miles away in the West Bank or in Gaza, and this might create a broader social movement? It didn't appear, to the extent that there was any opportunity for that to happening. Obviously, it's not. That's not happening. But is there any sort of like, because my understanding is from reading that there's not a lot of information that is getting to Israelis about what's happening in Gaza, or at least the specifics or the images, or, whether it's actually the facts or whether it's being absorbed. I know I've talked to people who've been doing reporting from the West Bank, and they say they go to Tel Aviv, and when they tell stories of what they've seen in the West Bank, people are like, no way. When you get this reflection from the ICJ and this stuff from the ICC, does that pierce that sort of denial?
In a way, yes. In a way, no. As I told you before, the first reaction, the immediate reaction for the arrest warrant, for the demand for the arrest warrant, because the arrest warrant were not issued yet, but it's quite probable that they will, not quite soon. The reaction was very furious. But I would say, with the addition of the ICJ, even more the ICJ than the ICC, because Israel is a part of the ICJ. The ICJ is an organ of the UN, and any country that is a member of the UN is a party to the ICJ, and Israel is, and it even defended itself in the ICJ, what it did not do in the ICC. I think what is being pierced is not the moral responsibility for what Israel is doing in Gaza. But yes, I think there is an understanding, a growing, still not that wide, but a growing understanding how it is being viewed worldwide. How does the international community is viewing our war in Gaza, certainly in Rafah? And there, yes, I do see a change. Of course, there is, the right wing, the extreme right wing, which is still in power, and I don't see it falling so soon, that are saying, what's the problem? Smotrich, Finance Minister Smotrich said, exterminate everything, exterminate Bir Balach, exterminate Khan Yunis, everything. So there is a part, and not a small part, unfortunately, in the Israeli society, which is quite happy with extermination. But I think there is a growing part that maybe, to itself, it says that it is also morally wrong, but they don't dare to say so. But they do say, listen, what we are doing in Rafah, what we are doing in Gaza is being viewed by the international community, by the international legal system as war crimes. And if we do not change our conduct, if we don't change the way we act in Rafah, the way we fight in Rafah, then Israel will be totally a pariah state, that we are on the road, on the road to this there. I must add that the report in the Guardian about the way Yossi Cohen, the ex-chief of Mossad, behaved, the way he met personally, according to the report, he met personally Bensouda and threatened her personally. This is something that I think wide range in the Israeli society saying, no, this is a mafia contact. The ex-head of the Mossad, the one who preceded Yossi Cohen, Tamir Pardo, said in an interview to us that this is a Cosa Nostra behavior.
Yeah.
So, yes, I think specifically the way Yossi Cohen allegedly behaved is conceived as something really stupid and arrogant and dangerous, everything together. But I think, generally speaking, the ICJ, yes, I think many people in Israel fear that we are on the way of being completely isolated. And I have to add something here. Vladimir Putin was indicted by the same prosecutor, by Karim Khan, for abducting children, Ukrainian children, to Russia, allegedly, for his responsibility for that. But Russia, and I think the Russian public, I'm not an expert in Russia, but for Russian public to be considered not a part of the West, it's something that is quite normal. This is part of the ideology of Putin. For many years, he's talking about Russification and that the West is the origin of all evil. This is not the way Israel is conceived themselves. They conceive themselves as part of the West. They don't see themselves, no, we are alone in this world. No, this is not the way most Israelis. There are some, like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, say, no, we are. There is a saying in Hebrew, Israel levadad tishkon, Israel will live alone. But this is a minority, according as I see it. The majority wants and believe that they are part of the West. And if we are, if all the organs of this West say that we behave like criminals, it's something that affects Israelis.
It's interesting, and I guess at least in terms of from an activist perspective outside of the country, it at least adds to the argument that increasing pressure on Israel from the outside may not change the moral assessment of what Israel is doing, but there is a practical, almost utilitarian perspective of that there's an opportunity for extreme isolation here, which I think very well may be the case. Meron Rapoport, we will obviously link to your piece and to the Guardian piece, and also to this piece in Haaretz, which makes it clear just how both important your reporting is and the level of jeopardy that's involved in it. And I really appreciate your coming on and talking to us about it. And I hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.